But if you can't answer Millennial and Gen Z trivia in terms of common vernacular,
oh geez,
you're gonna lose your medals. So
all right, I'm in.
So to yeet, James, means to like throw something, like get rid of it. Like
seriously?
Yeah.
Yeet? Like spell that for me.
Y-E-E-T.
Country of origin.
America. All right. So
moving on to the rye. And so just as a heads up for everybody that if you didn't get to read the Bourbon Sippers article, go check that out on explorewhiskey.com. I cover all of these very extensively, but in that article I specifically say their rye is killer.
Yeah.
I've been waiting on their rye. I've been waiting on it to get older. I was waiting for a long time for them to release a single barrel version of the rye, because when I wrote the article, they only had the straight rye. And when I was interviewing Ken, I was like, dude, you gotta offer this at a slightly higher proof. You gotta offer this as a single barrel. I tried to beg them to let me pick one as a single barrel for Bourbon Sippers, and they would not do it.
No.
But I was super excited when this came out, because their rye to me is really what shines in the bourbon. And so I think they're just really set up to have killer rye releases. And I'm curious what you think.
Mean killer rye leases?
Oh no. Even your dad is embarrassed by that one. Look at him. Even he's embarrassed by that one. But that's good though. I'll give you that one.
Thanks.
But I'm curious to see what you think of these, because these to me are very quintessential ryes. Like these are not ryes for people who don't like rye. Like these are.
I appreciate that, James.
Yeah, these are big, chewy ryes. And so getting your opinion on these is going to be fun.
Yeah. The rye is quite powerful.
And so, I should say that too before I forget. There's no barley in this. So it's 100% rye, but the rye is divided as 95% regular rye and 5% malted rye.
We had this discussion before of whether or not rye was usually malted, and I think that answers our question.
It's usually not.
Right, it's usually not.
You usually don't get it. And so this is kind of a unique attempt on it.
So to me, and I'm wondering if this is the fact that they're malting a small portion of the rye, but I get a slightly more earthy aroma to this rye than I would normally expect, in terms of, I feel like rye is usually to me either super minty or super dill. And on this one,
it's certainly minty though,
I would
right?
I would say it's minty, but there's a little bit of an earthy quality to it, which I don't know if it's the malted rye or just however they're doing their barrels, and but it smells good.
It smells really good. And so do a side by side right now on the nose between the straight rye and the single barrel, and let me know what you think.
The single barrel to me the aroma doesn't seem that drastically different on the single barrel from the.
Right. So now I'm going to tell you what I think, and you let me know.
Other than that, the straight rye smells a little brighter. I would say it's a little mintier.
Exactly. So what I was going to say is I think the straight rye, there's mint in both of them, but the straight rye has a little bit of a citrus note to it, like almost like a lemon note that brightens it up significantly. You don't get a whole lot of that in the single barrel. The single barrel is just straight up in your face, big rye. And the mint's there. It just smells fantastic. It smells like a heavier, richer pour. And we're at, let's see what the proof is on this guy, 103.5. So again, not too much of a difference.
Wow. That is not nearly as spicy. The straight rye is not nearly as spicy as I would have expected for 100% rye. That's really good.
Is it smooth, Paul? Is it smooth?
It's smooth.
Oh, we have a smooth rye. Wow. We have a smooth rye. Even at 100 proof, we have a smooth rye.
But to me, that actually doesn't taste as spicy as the bourbon did. And it's possible, I do, as you go through a few glasses, your taste buds and stuff get a little bit desensitized to some of that, but I feel like the bourbon was actually a little spicier than the rye, which doesn't really make sense. But
no, it doesn't. I probably disagree. I think the rye is a little bit spicier, but I think it's a little bit on the sweeter end of the profile for a rye, and so I think that might be.
I think it's just because my expectation of a rye would be that it's so much more powerful.
Well, wait till you get to the single barrel.
But as soon as I went back and tried the bourbon again, the mint is just like
Yeah.
It's really nice, like spearmint. There is citrus there for sure.
And Paul, what do I like in my ryes?
Mint.
I like mint.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you give me a minty rye, I'm going to be sold. And I think that's why I like it so much. I like, because I mean, everybody's had ryes that are just big cinnamon bombs, right? And it's hot. And then you're adding red hot cinnamon on top of higher proof. And it just gets to be a little bit overwhelming. You add that sweet mint component to it. And I think it just balances off rye so well. And again, rye plays well at younger ages, right? And so, at 4 years, you're still slightly on the young side for a rye, but you're getting close to sort of that magical 6 year for me for a rye.
This is definitely hotter on the finish than the bourbon, though.
It is.
Yeah.
Because it's spice. That's where the spice comes in. You get it on the lingering
really
finish.
Comes through on the finish.
If you're a bourbon drinker, I think the straight rye will be appealing because it is a little bit more on the sweet end. If you're a person that likes big ryes, it might be a little bit disappointing just because it is a little bit lighter on the palate than what you would expect. But I have a hard time thinking that anybody's going to just completely dislike the straight rye. It's really kind of down the center lane of the rye profile.
That single barrel is powerful.
The single barrel hits you in the face.
Oh my gosh.
Even though it's only
actually,
like 103.
I don't know if you saw my face, but my face actually, when I was a little bit, wasn't expecting that. Yeah,
it's a kick in the teeth of rye.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they told me like they were very unapologetic about the fact that they make rye for people who drink rye whiskey. They wanted a big, heavy, sort of like meaty rye, and that's what you get. And
anyway,
so
wrapping up New Riff.
So what is your total take? So let's go back to the bourbons.
My total take is that I would absolutely, without a question, buy the single barrel bourbon.
Yeah, it's delicious.
The single barrel rye is a little too much for me in terms of where I fall on the enjoyment of rye. It's a little too intense. Like I would definitely enjoy a pour at a bar. I would never buy a bottle of it for myself, because I just wouldn't go to this bottle often enough. It's such a, like you said, there's seasonality to whiskey. I don't drink much scotch during the summer. I drink more bourbon during the summer. I drink rye in the winter, and Florida winters are not very long. And so
it's like 5 days.
Yeah.
It's somewhere in the middle of January.
Yeah. So there's like 2 fortnights worth of weeks that I drink.
2 fortnights. Okay.
I did that just for you.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
But yeah, there's only a few weeks each year that I really sit down to have a glass of whiskey in the evening, and I think, man, I would really like a rye right now. And I have like 4 bottles of Midwinter Nights, and those are what I go to.
Yeah, but I mean that's different though, because those are port finished.
Yeah,
they're sweeter. Those are Christmas in a glass.
They
like
are.
Those are winter.
But I'm just saying, most of the time, a rye is not what I'm going to reach for. So for me, the single barrel on the rye is a little too intense. But I will say there's a level of complexity it adds over the standard rye, and in a blind taste, I would guess that this was older also, because it has a darker, more intense aroma and flavor to it. But for me, it's not quite what I would reach for. So for me, I would rank them the single barrel bourbon, probably actually the regular rye, and then the regular bourbon, and then the single barrel.
All right.
Rye.
So I will say from the bourbon drinker standpoint, definitely if you have a choice between the two, I would go with the single barrel bourbon. I don't think you're going to be disappointed in it. I think most people who drink a lot of bourbon will find the straight bourbon fine. At 100 proof, it's hard to say that it's too thin or anything like that. I just don't think you're going to find it as complex as you do the single barrel bourbon.
Yeah.
If you drink a lot of rye, go straight to the single barrel.
Yeah.
It is very much a big, bold, tasty rye.
But I really like the regular. The straight rye is actually delicious.
And that's what I was going to say, is if you're somebody who's new to rye, you've been drinking a fair amount of bourbon, so your palate is developed in that sense, but you're sort of just starting to get into rye. I think the straight rye is a good place for you to start. I would not go straight to the single barrel because I think it might overwhelm your palate a little bit. And that's where I was when I first got into whiskey. I drank mostly bourbon, didn't drink too much rye. In fact, I didn't really care for rye. Now I think I would prefer rye over pretty much anything. I think New Riff is a rare opportunity to go out, find a smaller producer that's craft oriented, that's doing something different. It's their own product, and it's going to taste different than the other things on your shelf. And that's why I go back to the bottles that I have of New Riff on my shelf.